Okay, so my job, I think, has been irritant, primarily. Thank you. I enjoyed those three presentations. I have to say the car crash feels about right as a description where we're heading. We do live in interesting times, and I think there are two or three things I've been hearing recently which support a lot of what's been said, but I'd like to turn some of them into questions. So I hear from business people I talk to, particularly thoughtful ones, that their conclusion at the moment is that the current economic model is broken. They happen to be successful within it, but it is time-bound. We're getting lots of things wrong. We value things wrongly. They'd like to understand what the new economic model is because they would like to succeed within it. That's one issue. Second one, I met a European Minister of the Environment recently behind closed doors, so his name, he will remain nameless, or she, who said that he is the Minister of Environment, and in his country the environment is seen as the enemy of growth. When he opens his mouth they say stop, because there's an assumption that he will either add cost or delay. That seems to him to be an incompatible situation, but that is the reality for those people trying to get that balance right. Science tells us that the clock is ticking and certain things have to change, and that our current consumption-based model of economics is fundamentally at the heart of the problem and needs to be turned around radically. So do the MDG revision, SDG opportunities offer that the world the chance to rethink that? I like your donut, Kate. I will be looking at it more deeply, and I liked clearly your focus on decoupling. I worry that the pace at which that decoupling needs to happen might be politically unpalatable, that the aspirations for an awful lot of people are to break through your outer circle, to achieve a plasma screen lifestyle, and there is a significant piece of communication and awareness raising globally for us all to recognise that there is a safe place to be in your donut and there's an unsafe place to be. And I wonder how politically palatable, nationally or globally, that is, and what it will take for that to be understood better. So I completely buy the picture, but I question how that's going to be achieved. Inequality, Rolf, I agree, you said inequality a lot. In this room, we helped launch the Economic Outlook report of the Asia Development Bank a few weeks ago, 6 to 8% annual growth, but they said growing inequality. Little tiny alarm bell being rung by observers of economies, and I'm interested that the World Economic Forum, in its annual review of global risks, has got income inequality as the most likely and the most impactful risk for 2012. It's up there with greenhouse gas emissions, water scarcity, food and fuel price volatility, all the things you'd sort of expect, but slap bang up there is income inequality. I think it's absolutely right, Rolf, you drew attention to that. I'd like to better understand what you mean by green wealth footprint, because it sounds like a nice idea, but I'd love to understand a bit more what you mean by that. Claire, the car crash. Will the UN system, the global system, collaborate in a lovely, heartwarming way to make sure that these are complementary activities?
Yes.
Could you like to? I'd love to see a previous example of that happening. Maybe there are some. I don't want to be too sceptical. The glass, let's face it, has to be half full on this subject. But I think we've got to be very careful how we, and those of us outside helping to support and encourage these processes, try to be simplifiers rather than complicators in what is already going to be a complicated process. I think there's a real challenge for those of us from outside. Two final points. I think what's really interesting is we have traditionally considered that development and poverty are the remit of the aid bureaucracies and the aid agencies, and they are clearly becoming less and less the remit of those organisations. They're still important, of course, but they're modest players globally now when you look alongside flows of other sorts of finance, and you recognise the fact, as I think Rolf's reminded us, that 70% of the world's poor now live in middle-income countries. These aren't, and I know that the aid programmes around the world are struggling with what to do about that fact. This isn't a welfare issue, or is it a welfare issue? This is an economic development issue. Let's get private sector DNA into the aid programme. What the hell does that mean if you spent your life trying to work with and through governments, often who don't understand how to work with the private sector either? So there's a whole set of new conversations that this MDG process or SDG process needs to be building on and facilitating. So that, I think that's definitely a positive side. I spent an interesting day talking to a group of European standardization organizations recently. And if you think the accountancy profession is narrow in its view of the world, you should meet the standardization organizations, although they were very interesting. But it just rang an alarm bell for me. They are brilliant at working out that the washing machine in my home is electronically safe, and I'm not going to kill myself. But as I tried to suggest to them, let's make certain that at the same time as we're trying to make certain that my electrical appliance is safe, it isn't a safe electrical appliance in an unsafe planet. If we're going to set standards, standard setting tends to be narrow and right or wrong and black or white, and there's something about standards which might work for an electric kettle but doesn't necessarily work for the world. It's because it's more complicated than that. So I think we've got to be very careful about how we set them. That's not an argument for not setting standards. My goodness, we need to raise the bar. But the method by doing so, I think, is going to be really important. And finally, let's not forget the fact that if we're not extremely careful, a changing climate will undo all of those development gains that we have genuinely seen over the last 15 to 20 to 30 years. These are real achievements on the part of a lot of people working hard. Just a metre of sea level rise, I say just a metre of sea level rise, which is pretty much clear now. And we'll have to work out what to do with 100 million displaced people in Asia alone. The practical, physical, economic and political, social consequences just of that is going to be enormously taxing, and I'm not convinced that we are equipped particularly well as a global society to do it, and our economy may see that as opportunity. I think it's fraught with risk, so sorry to end on a depressing note, but I think that's the context within which these conversations need to happen in the next 18 months.